Sometimes in life, we are being held back by our past, and this prevents us from moving forward in the way we want. And in this video, we are going to see 3 different steps that can help you alter your neurology so that you're no longer trapped by all the old representations of who you used to be. So when we talk about personal change, there is the how to change something, which has thread to all the NLP tools out there, and there is the what should I change exactly. And that is usually where the mismatch starts, because we may not be fully conscious of what we do need to change at this specific moment. Using some anchoring process or some submodalities or some slide of mouth on yourself so that you change is actually the easiest part, but using all those techniques on the right problem is much more complicated. So when you start applying the steps described here, you may uncover that the one thing that is starting to shift in your mind maybe was not the one you were expecting, and maybe the positive change at the end of the process might not be the one you have anticipated, but it was always the one you needed the most at this moment. And to better clarify what exactly do we have to change, we start by using the meta model as usual, so that we can pinpoint more specifically what is it that I would like to change, and how can I describe that thing in better terms than just I hate my life, I hate myself, I want this person to get out of my sight. Yeah, more specifically, what is the kind of release or specific change you are going after right now. And to give you the most simplified version I have ever come up with, it is to start by what stops me from relating to the past, all the model operators of past impossibility. I haven't been able to change this, I can't move on because, well, whatever. Okay, what stops you, or what has stopped you in the past from changing that one thing? And on the reverse, with the future, what would happen if it could change right now? What would happen if it had already changed? So you have the past and you have the future, and then when you ask yourself those questions, you stay aware of whenever an objection comes in your head. Things starting by yes, but, or some feeling of frustration. If there is something you repress saying because you're like, well, I already know it is impossible, and instead of clarifying, you just swallow everything. Okay, those frustration moments, or any kind of objection starting by, but it is not possible, but I can't because, all of those things will be the main thing to target or investigate so that you can finally move on. So with those past negative memories or all those difficult things from the past, you start by what stops me from changing that, what stops me from getting free, from being liberated of those past memories or painful experiences, stuff like this, what stopped me in the past, and what would happen if I could finally get over it. What would happen if I had already been successful in getting over it for good. And before getting into the next step, you have a complete course on the meta model I have created years ago. I am giving it out for free right now because I think what I can produce in terms of clarification on the meta model is much better right now than what was in this course, but it was the most simplified version from which was coming that graph with only the specific language patterns that can provoke the best changes. You have this down below if you want to check it out. It is completely free. And with that in mind, you have the second step here with perceptual positions. Perceptual positions simply relate to getting out of your own head and imagining, pretending for a few seconds or a few minutes that you are somebody else. What it would look like if you had access to the brain, the memories, the skills of somebody who is not you. And when comes the time of using those perceptual positions on negative memories, quite often it is going to relate to identifying momentarily, of course, with the mindset and the psychology and the perception of the other people involved in your traumatic situation or the things you can't seem to get over, who else was involved in those moments during those situations, and if you were getting inside their mind, not to identify with their whole identity, we don't care about this, simply to better investigate what were their intentions. If anyone hurt you in your past, okay, what was the intention of that person? That person may have wanted to cause harm to you, but why? Why did that person want to cause harm to you? And that might be slightly uncomfortable. If you feel like it is too much to take in, definitely skip that phase or do it only with somebody qualified to help you. And the other ways of using those positions is by getting yourself much softer into the body and mind of somebody who is just not involved in that whole situation. If you have suffered some difficult moments in your life, okay, could you dissociate from your own mind and get inside the mind of somebody who is just not involved, maybe somebody who was not even there that day, but you just take your best friend, or if that person was not there, or anybody else who might know you but who was not involved in that situation, and you imagine you become that one person who was not involved. From the eyes and the ears of that other person, how do you now see that situation? Which new perception, therefore, can you develop about what happened during those difficult memories, those difficult events? What else did you not notice about what was there or what was not there at those specific moments? And the last way of using those positions is the essence of NLP modeling, identifying with somebody who's got all the keys, all the solutions you would have required, you would have needed to handle those problems back then in the best way possible. Who was or who is or who can be somebody who, if you had been that person, if that person had been there, that person would have been able to deal with those situations simply very easily. It would have been brushed away in an instant. That person just had the skills, has the skills somehow to deal with those situations very fast. Who is an example of a person like this? And as the last step, you might imagine or pretend mentally you get this time in the body and mind of that one person. The person who could have handled those difficult memories, those difficult moments super easily. What new perception do you get access to consciously when you get into the mind of that person, seeing the whole situation through their way of seeing things and acting upon things? What else do they do in that situation that becomes possible? Because those are people who can handle that. Therefore, so far we have clarified what we wanted to change the most and how can we start confusing the limitation or the negative feelings linked with those old memories. Then, in the best case scenario, that could be enough to solve everything, and usually I like to add a third step, which will be to create a dialogue with the parts in conflict. So for example, if you have noticed by doing the first two steps that some really difficult blockage keeps coming back because you just have this one feeling that is confusing, blurry, and dark in your head, and that doesn't really want to go away now, then you can ask that part of yourself responsible for that one feeling to give itself a name. How could you call the part of yourself that is still blocked? And now you can engage a dialogue with that part of yourself. What could you say if the part of yourself that is still blocked was an entire human being by itself? How could you describe what they look like, and how could you engage a respectful, underline respectful, dialogue with that part of yourself? Anything that seems to resist in yourself, you just visualize whatever shape or form that part of yourself might have at that moment, and notice how you could establish communication in a healthier way with that part of you. Then you use that dialogue to clarify this time what is it that this part of you needs. That part of you didn't feel maybe understood. That part of you may have felt betrayed, maybe. That part of you may have felt neglected. Okay, what is it that this part of you does need? The part of you that is resisting the final healing, because if that could be gone, then you would just recover from all the things that happened. Then, if there is still resistance about this, how could you engage a conversation with yourself in that case so that you find out what is it this part of me, therefore, needs? And how can I bring that need to that part of myself? What can I do, or how can I think differently, or what would I eventually have to let go of so that this part of me is getting much more relief in that sense. And after you have completed this whole process, you might be confused, you might still have some concerns, and quite often the biggest unconscious changes happen not exactly at the moment you use one of those tools, but during the few days once you have used them. So you might be surprised to notice you don't have the same emotional reactions, or if you have some negative dialogue in your head that tends to come back once in a while, maybe the dialogue will change entirely, or maybe you won't have the same images from your past. Maybe you will feel better about the things that happened in the past, and maybe you will uncover more possibilities than the ones you thought were at your disposal when you were thinking about what blocks you in life at this phase. So as a reminder, you have an entire course on the better model and how to use better questioning to open the mind of people whenever they need to, and how to influence them more powerfully. It is given to you right now, and I hope it will be helpful whatever you want to use it for. And with that in mind, thanks a lot for watching. Ask anything you would like to ask if you want some more clarification or some more specific situation you have trouble dealing with, and see you soon in the next video.